This Friday, Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan are back to switch things up in Disney's Freakier Friday.
Totally, yes.
It's an absolute riot.
Woo!
And the only movie that can be described as
So much weirder than the last time.
What last time?
it's the frequel
You ready?
we've been waiting for.
That absolutely slays.
What deeply out-of-touch old person came up with that?
You did.
Wow.
Don't miss the comedy event of the summer for all ages. Disney's Freakier Friday in theaters this Friday. Get tickets now. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
This episode is brought to you by the world's first reposado from Tequila Herradura. Made with slow-cooked, hand-harvested agave sealed into oak barrels and aged 11 months. Before being enjoyed in your glass. Experience the world's first reposado. Tequila Herradura. Please drink responsibly. Responsibility.org. Tequila Herradura. 40% alcohol by volume. Imported by Brown-Forman, Louisville, Kentucky. Herradura is a registered trademark. Copyright 2025 Brown-Forman Corporation.
It's Wednesday Addams. I see you're trying to distract yourself from your own banal thoughts. Let me help. Here's a recording thing made of my latest root canal.
Wednesday, Season 2, begins August 6th, only on Netflix.
Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised.
A woman was on the phone stating that a friend of hers was hurt, and then a male got on the phone stating that an unknown male had entered his home and he had shot them.
Welcome back to Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Brandon. You're listening to episode 103, Bizarre Love Triangle.
They found Christine Banfield in an upstairs bedroom. She had been stabbed multiple times in the upper body, and Joseph Ryan, who had been shot multiple times in the upper body.
This week, we're going to cover a high-profile case, and as my co-host, Brandon Morgan, likes to say, an investigation that's ripped from the headlines. There has been a recent arrest, which we'll get to, but before, I just wanted to start with a disclaimer that this case has not yet been adjudicated, which means that anyone mentioned is presumed innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. Having said that, imagine an upscale neighborhood in Virginia, a suburb of Washington, D.C., an exclusive, tight-knit community filled with million-dollar homes and tree-lined streets, just about 20 minutes away from the Capitol. It was 7:47 in the morning on February 24th, 2023, when a 911 call was made from a cell phone inside a home on Stablebrook Way. Nobody says anything, but you can hear an anguished, guttural cry.
Fairfax County 911, where's our emergency? Hello, Fairfax County 911.
2 more 911 attempts were made, back to back, and within minutes. But the calls would end without anyone saying anything. Then, 10 minutes later, at 8:02, another call to 911 from that same phone. This time, a young woman begs for help. She's so distraught she can't say the address. Then a guy comes on the line, saying he shot a man who he found stabbing his wife in their home on Stablebrook Way. First responders raced to the neighborhood, and within minutes, they were on scene and they found the man and woman who had made those 911 calls unharmed, along with a 4-year-old little girl. The father was 39-year-old Brendan Banfield, and the little girl was his daughter. The woman was 22-year-old Juliana Magalhães, the family's au pair from Brazil. Officers went upstairs, and in the main bedroom of the house, they discover a scene that they would describe as appalling. 37-year-old Christine Banfield, Brendan's wife, was suffering from stab wounds to her upper body. Near Christine on the floor was 39-year-old Joseph Ryan. Joseph was dead from gunshot wounds. He'd been struck twice, once in the head and once in the chest. A medical examiner would later testify that the shot to the chest had been fatal. Christine would be rushed to the hospital, where she would be pronounced dead on arrival. Here's Chief Kevin Davis from the Fairfax County Police Department on the morning of the killings at an impromptu press conference in front of the Banfield residence.
This morning, we received a cell phone 911 call that was an open line hang-up. When we get the cell phone 911 calls, it doesn't give us an exact address, but that call was captured and noted, and 13 minutes later at 8:02 a.m., we received a cell phone 911 call from the very same cell phone, and two persons communicated with our 911 call taker. The husband of this home, who I am not going to identify beyond identifying him as a husband, and the au pair who resides in this home, who I am not going to identify beyond describing her as an au pair. At that 8:02 911 cell phone call, the husband and the au pair communicate with the 911 call taker. The husband tells the 911 call taker that he just shot a man inside of his home, and the husband tells the 911 call taker that the man who he had just shot had stabbed his wife.
What the chief didn't say that morning was that Christine was a pediatric ICU nurse, and her husband Brendan was an agent for the criminal division of the IRS. But who was Joseph Ryan? And what exactly was he doing at the Banfield home early in the morning on a Friday? According to the husband, Brendan, and the au pair, Juliana, they had no idea. The Washington Post details an interview that Juliana gave to detectives that morning. The nanny would explain that she left the house sometime after 7 a.m. Not long after Brendan had left for work, Christine remained at home while Juliana left to take the Banfield's daughter on a day trip to the zoo. But not long after leaving, Juliana remembers that she forgot their packed lunches, and so she returns home to go get them. When she arrives, she sees an unfamiliar car in the driveway. She doesn't get out. She sits in the car with the little girl and calls Christine, who doesn't answer. Juliana then calls Brendan, who happened to be nearby, and says he'll be right there. After he arrives, Brendan, Juliana, and the 4-year-old go into the house together. Juliana would tell police that she would take the little girl to the basement, but then she follows Brendan upstairs, where the two found this man that they didn't know, Joseph Ryan, hunched over Christine with a knife at her throat. Juliana tells detectives that Brendan pointed a gun at Ryan and alleged that he shot him once with his service weapon as he was stabbing Christine. Brendan then turns to Juliana and tells her to go get a Glock, store it in a safe in the closet, which she does. And when she comes back, she says that she shot Joseph Ryan once in self-defense. At the scene, police would recover a knife and 2 guns. But during the news conference that morning, they don't tell the press any of the details that Juliana shared with them about what had happened that morning. From Court TV, here's Chief Kevin Davis wrapping up that morning's news conference.
So I'll say this, that we're working through the exact nature, because there's different relationships amongst the 4 people inside the home, and I'm not quite prepared to describe those relationships right now because we're still working through some next of kin notifications. But again, I'll just say that all 4 people inside the home are known to each other. All 4 people are accounted for. 2 are dead and 2 are with the Fairfax County Police Department.
So many unanswered questions. The only thing police would say was that Joseph Ryan was somehow connected to Christine, but they wouldn't say how or why he'd been at the home that morning. We now know that behind the scenes, police were questioning Juliana's story. They were suspicious of those 911 calls that she and Brendan had made that just didn't track with the intense situation of the events as they had laid them out. Investigators would ask Juliana if she was in a romantic relationship with Brendan, and she would say no. Meantime, Brendan wouldn't even talk to the police. But again, none of this was mentioned in that press conference, and no one was arrested at first. 8 months later, on October 13th, 2023, it was quite a shock when the Fairfax County Police Department announced that Juliana Magalhaes, the au pair, had been arrested and charged with the second-degree murder of Joseph Ryan, which came as a surprise because according to that 911 call, Brendan Banfield had said that he had shot Joseph, who he claimed was stabbing his wife.
The husband tells the 911 call taker that he just shot a man inside of his home, and the husband tells the 911 call taker that the man who he had just shot had stabbed his wife.
Now, Juliana was being charged with the second-degree murder of Joseph Ryan. And at this point, we still don't know why Joseph had even been at the home that morning and who he was in relationship to Christine. It was all very confusing because no one had been charged with murdering Christine. Lieutenant Aaron Weeks with the Fairfax County Police Department speaking at a press conference after Juliana's arrest.
Over the last 7 months, detectives have continued to investigate this very complex case. In the 911 call, it was learned that the family's au pair was the female heard on the 911 call, and then the male was Christine Banfield's husband was heard. Through the great police work, they have been able to get to a point where they have identified the au pair as Juliana Perez Margulies, and they have charged her with second-degree murder. She is currently being housed at the Fairfax County Adult Detention Center. She is accused of shooting Joseph Ryan.
What was Joseph Ryan's connection to the family?
Joseph Ryan, the connection that we've been able to locate through the investigation is he was known to the victim, Christine Banfield.
And do police know why he entered the home or was there?
That is part of the active investigation. This is still, even though we've made an arrest in this investigation, it's still very much an active investigation, and we are leaving all options open.
This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. Summer's almost out and fall's calling. Luckily, Nordstrom has everything you need for the season ahead, all under $100. Discover new arrivals from your favorite brands like Mango, Princess Polly, Wave, Free People, BDG, and more. Whether you're planning a last-minute getaway, heading back to class, or refreshing your office looks, you'll find the latest trends and beauty must-haves without breaking your budget. It's easy, too, with free shipping, free returns, and in-store order pickup. Shop today, in stores, and at Nordstrom.com.
On WhatsApp, no one can see or hear your personal messages. Whether it's a voice call, message, or sending a password. To WhatsApp, it's all just this. So whether you're sharing the streaming password in the family chat or trading those late-night voice messages that could basically become a podcast, your personal messages stay between you, your friends, and your family. No one else. Not even us. WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone.
Una silla de masajes puede parecer extravagante. 8 configuraciones diferentes, intensidad ajustable, además es calefaccionado. Y se siente tan bien. Sí, una silla de masajes puede parecer extravagante. Y 2, bueno, aún más. Pero cuando esas sillas de masajes vienen con un auto, se vuelven bastante prácticas. El nuevo Volkswagen Tiguan 2025 con funciones premium como los asientos delanteros con masaje disponibles. Solo parece extravagante.
Right now, at the Home Depot, you'll find storage solutions made to fit your needs. Grab an HDX Tough Tote to protect your tools. Or keep your sports equipment contained with reinforced snap-fit lids. Or stack up and make better use of your space with bins and totes built to last. Whatever you're storing, we've got the gear to keep it organized and protected at the Home Depot. How doers get more done.
If you'll recall, the story was that when Brendan talked to the 911 operator, he said that he had shot Joseph and that it was in self-defense because he was stabbing his wife, Christine. However, when Juliana spoke to police, she would tell them that Brendan had told her to go get a Glock in the safe and that when she returned, she shot Joseph in the chest, and according to the medical examiner, that was the fatal wound. But only Juliana was arrested. Brendan Banfield was not. And the day that Juliana was arrested, a search warrant was conducted at the Banfields' home where the slayings occurred. And in that same main bedroom where Christine was stabbed and Joseph was shot to death, investigators found something chilling. Now, 8 months after the killings, they were both still living in the home and sleeping in the main bedroom where Christine was stabbed. A framed photograph on the nightstand of Juliana and Brendan in what appeared to be a loving embrace. And they also found her clothing in the closet of the bedroom. It was clear she'd moved out of the guest bedroom. According to WUSA 9, in April of 2024, a preliminary hearing would be held where Senior Assistant Commonwealth Attorney Eric Klingon revealed that Juliana and Brendan had practiced shooting at a gun range 2 months before the murders, and that Brendan had bought a pistol at the range. It was that Glock that Juliana had used to shoot Joseph Ryan. The prosecution also said that the pair had replaced their cell phones shortly after the killings, which was suspicious. As a law enforcement official, someone like Brendan Banfield would know that getting rid of their physical cell phones would disrupt a full investigative digital trail, and that Juliana had created a new iCloud account and Brendan had deleted his account activity. This, according to a search warrant affidavit. By then, they also knew that the morning of the killings, Brendan had been scheduled to be at work at 7:30. However, after leaving his home, he didn't drive straight to work. Instead, he pulls into a McDonald's parking lot and allegedly sits in his vehicle until Juliana called him at 7:37. Remember, according to Juliana, she said that she saw a strange car in the driveway and that Christine wasn't answering her cell phone, prompting Brendan to return home. Prosecutors would also point to the long gap between 2 911 calls placed from Juliana's cell phone, and that on the last 911 call that morning, Juliana tells an operator that a friend had been hurt before Brendan gets on the line and says he shot his wife's attacker. Juliana would be held without bond. People were left to speculate. What exactly had happened in the Banfield home that morning? Why was the nanny being charged with the second-degree murder of a man that no one seemed to clearly understand what he was doing in that household? A man, Joseph Ryan, who had no history of violence. Still, months would go by with no further arrests until September 16th of 2024, when a grand jury would indict Brendan Banfield on the premeditated first-degree murders of his wife Christine and Joseph Ryan. Here's Chief Kevin Davis from the Fairfax County Police Department announcing those charges.
On February 24th, 2023, I stood in the middle of a cul-de-sac street in Fairfax County and described the deaths of 2 persons inside of a residential home. Now, 570 days later, we know the deaths of Joseph Ryan and Christine Banfield are both, in fact, murders. As you are aware, we charged Juliana Margalis with the murder of Joseph Ryan on October 13th, 2023. She remains in custody and awaits an upcoming trial. As described by Mr. Descano, we are today announcing aggravated murder charges against Brendan Banfield for the murder of his wife, Christine Banfield, and Joseph Ryan. To be clear, Brendan Banfield, then 38, and Christine Banfield, then 37, were married and living in a single-family home with their then 4-year-old daughter. Also living in the house was the family au pair, Juliana Margalis, then 22 years old. Joseph Ryan, then 39 years old, lived in Springfield, Virginia at the time of his murder inside the Banfield home. Fairfax County police officers responded to a 911 call from within the home on February 24th, 2023. In an upstairs bedroom, we found Joseph Ryan deceased as a result of gunshot wounds and found Christine Banfield suffering from stab wounds. Christine was transported to a local hospital and pronounced dead. We recovered 2 firearms and a knife. We know Brendan Banfield and Juliana Margalis, the family au pair, were involved in a romantic relationship at the time of the murders. I will not describe our victim Joseph Ryan's relationship with anyone involved in the case at the moment because this investigation continues. And like any criminal investigation, our probing of the facts does not end when an arrest is made. This much is clear. We have evidence to now allege that Christine Banfield's life was unlawfully taken and Joseph Ryan's life was unlawfully taken. We are very limited, as Mr. Descano stated, in providing additional details to your many inevitable questions this evening. We will not try this case in a news conference, nor will we compromise the integrity of our ongoing probe and investigation.
At this press conference, the chief was asked the question, at what point during this investigation did Brendan Banfield become a suspect?
So that kind of gets back to our efforts to kind of describe gently that we can't go into certain aspects of the case, and that's one of them. So again, there's a jury that will assemble, and they're going to hear these facts in much greater detail than you're hearing them today.
Deputy Commonwealth Attorney Eric Klingen.
The great investigative work of the Fairfax County Police Department led us to new information, which was instrumental in securing today's indictment.
Prosecutors say that expert bloodstain pattern specialists and forensic analysis helped investigators pursue these charges against Brendan Banfield. And at a recent bond hearing for Brendan Banfield, prosecutors would also allege that Joseph Ryan was lured to the couple's home through a sexual fetish site. An account on FetLife had been set up on Christine's computer, but it isn't clear who actually created this profile. According to prosecutors, Joseph had gone to the Banfield home, believing that he was going to meet a woman he had come to know as Anastasia 9. Anastasia 9's profile photo was of a petite woman in a one-piece bathing suit, and that Joseph and Anastasia 9 had planned a rendezvous that morning for consensual rough sex. Prosecutor Eric Klingen would say that during their investigation, they wouldn't find any evidence to support that Christine was into knife play, binding, and BDSM. They would say that a month before the killings, Christine had sent a picture of herself to her husband wearing that one-piece bathing suit, and that her husband, Brendan, had sent that photo to Juliana, who emailed it to herself. Then hours later, authorities would say that the photo was uploaded to a new FetLife profile under the username Anastasia 9. Reporting from the Washington Post says, quote, using Telegram, an encrypted messaging app, Ryan and Anastasia 9 discussed rough sex, including experimenting with blood play, an arrangement in which one person deliberately cuts another. Ultimately, the users decided to meet on that February morning, end quote. Prosecutors have not said that Juliana and Brendan lured Joseph Ryan to the home that morning, but they have offered a motive: lust, as the two were in a romantic relationship, before the murders and after. Ultimately, at the end of this bond hearing, Brendan Banfield was denied bail, and he will remain in custody until his trial, which is scheduled for early February. If convicted, he faces a life sentence without the possibility of parole, and we will continue to follow this case. Juliana Magalhaes' trial is scheduled for next month. If convicted, she could be sentenced to 40 years in prison. This will absolutely be a high-profile case with lots of twists and turns, as there is still so much we don't know about what happened that morning. But we will bring you the latest developments and commentary here at Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Brandon. Speaking of commentary, now that you've got the setup, stick around for Criminal Mischief's bonus content. Here, my co-host Brandon Morgan and I will discuss this case in more detail. As you can imagine, we'll have a lot to talk about in this alleged bizarre love triangle. And as always, thanks for listening. From Cloud 10, Criminal Mischief is a pie-in-the-sky production recorded in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're produced by Brandon Morgan and myself, music by Soundstripe. I'm Carolyn Osorio, your writer and host.